forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings, the madness has arrived. Welcome to a March Madness preview edition of Bigger Ten. 8 Big Ten teams have made the field. Should have been 9. Rutgers got screwed. The only team, in my opinion, that got screwed in the entire field of 68 this year. But then again, they did have 3 quad 3 or worse losses, so they kind of put their fate somewhat in the hands of the committee, but that should not have happened. Rutgers should have been in. Nevertheless, 8 teams to cover. I'm Steve Dace. He is my co-host, never partner, Aaron McIntyre. It's the second most wonderful time of the year. Aaron, how are you?
Doing quite well. Gearing up for what should be a really, really mad edition of March Madness. In my estimation, we've been talking about this all season, and now we're going to see if it's actually going to come to fruition. Of course, this season, this wacky season, wouldn't it just be hilarious if everything was just kind of chalky all the way around?
I know.
You know, expect the unexpected. Everybody expects something mad, some craziness, especially this year, to happen. Wouldn't it be funny if it was just like, oh, chalk?
We had one of the highest ratios of underdogs of 20 points or more to win outright ever. In the history of point spreads, this year is one of the highest ratios of that. We had the preseason number 1 team not make the NCAA tournament for the first time in about 50 years. We had multiple teams that were in the top 25, top 10 at some point this season not make the NCAA tournament, including 3 different teams that met that, or 4 different teams that met that threshold from our own league: Rutgers, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan. All teams ranked in the top 25 or top 10 at some point this year. None of them made the tournament. It is one of the craziest years that I can possibly remember, which is going to put, that formula, those data points, those metrics that I put out every year that are on the Michigan podcast video for this week right here on the channel. This year is going to put that rubric to the absolute test. But you know me, I don't gamble on outliers. I play the numbers, I play the trend, I play the data, and I look for outliers within the data and the trends, not outliers outside of the data and trends, which means I'll have a very good year with my bracket or not. All right. But we shall see. That's how we're going to start this week, actually. We're each going to go through our brackets. Do you want to do the whole bracket at once, region by region? How do you want to do it?
We're going to go region by region, starting in the South region. So we're going left, bottom, or top left, bottom left, top right, bottom right, all the way through. I'll have your bracket on the left side of the screen, my bracket on the right side of the screen.
Very well. All right. Let us begin. I will start on the left. This is my bracket in the South region. I have the number 1 overall seed, Alabama. I have them advancing past whoever comes out of the play-in game. Maryland and West Virginia, good old-fashioned college football rivalry there. I have West Virginia coming out of there. Maryland, guys, has 2 wins this year away from home.
Yep.
2. And they're both against Minnesota. Okay. San Diego State and Charleston, I've got the popular 5-12 upset here with Charleston against San Diego State. I almost went with Furman over Virginia without Ben Vander Plas. I mean, you saw against Duke how limited they were offensively again without him. I went ahead and went with Virginia, but I thought long and hard about picking Furman here. Creighton is a team that the analytics and my historical Nuggets or metric of Nuggets loves. So I'll have them over NC State. Baylor surviving the Gauchos of UCSB. Utah State in a mild upset against Missouri, and then Arizona over the Ivy League champion of Princeton. In the round of 32, I'll take Alabama to survive against West Virginia, but Huggy Bear will drag them into the mosh pit. That'll be a fist fight for sure. I'll take Charleston over Virginia as a double-digit seed to make the Sweet 16. I'll take Creighton to upset Baylor, which has basically just stopped playing defense since the calendar went to the month of March. They've just literally stopped guarding people. And I mean, seriously, just watch their games. It's around the world. Get any shot you want against Baylor right now. Arizona over Utah State to advance to the Sweet 16. In this regional, Alabama gets by the Cinderella of Charleston. Arizona able to get past Creighton. And then I have the top 2 seeds in this region, Alabama and Arizona, meeting in the regional final with Arizona. They are on that list of the Bart Tovik top 6 in offensive efficiency since February 1. They're on the list. Alabama is not. So I will take Arizona to advance to the Final Four out of the South region.
Not a heck of a lot of variance, and I just want to state for the record, as I stated off the air before this show, I could not even see your bracket when I did my picks for this bracket. Not a whole lot of variance in this region from mine to yours. I've got Alabama, of course, won over the 16. West Virginia, I just think the way that they play defense is going to cause a lot of problems for Maryland. I, too, have the 12-5 upset in Charleston. I know you mentioned a few weeks ago, and they've kind of been a darling of sharps all season long in Charleston. I've got them pulling the 12-5 upset. It was really hard for me, honestly, not to pick every 12-5.
I almost did, too.
As an upset this year. Really hard for me. I just had to force myself not to. Virginia, I've got them beating the 13 seed Furman. I actually have a 30-1 ticket on Creighton to go all of the way. Some of their metrics, as you mentioned, were even better. Looked a little even better about a month and a half ago.
Just to further your bet there, Aaron, they're like 4 wins under their metrics. Mm-hmm. And so you wonder if those things start, maybe those breaks go your way now here down the stretch perhaps.
Yep. Yeah. So I've got them getting away from NC State. I have Baylor beating UC Santa Barbara. In the 3-14 matchup. One piece of variance, I've got actually Missouri over Utah State, but I don't fault your pick there at all. Utah State is no slouch. And then, of course, Arizona. In the round of 32, I've got Alabama over West Virginia. I think West Virginia still has a chance to muck things up against Alabama. I just think Alabama, talent-wise, far superior, no matter what style of play they get dragged into. Got Charleston, actually, same as you, over Virginia. They go to the Sweet 16 in my bracket. Creighton over Baylor, same as you. They head to the Sweet 16. And Arizona over Missouri in the round of 32. So I have the same matchup in the Sweet 16 as do you. I've got Alabama over Charleston and Arizona over Creighton. And I, too, picked Arizona to come out of this region. So now we go on to the Eastern region, Steve.
I have number 1 Purdue advancing as the 1 seed against the play-in winner. I actually think if I'm Purdue, I'm going to root heavily for Florida Atlantic in this next game.
Yep.
Heavily. But I think Memphis will get it done and advance there. Duke, I think, goes down to Oral Roberts. I love the fact that every pundit on TV is picking Duke after they won the conference tournament. Doesn't it just seem like that team every year that wins its conference tournament with a big name after kind of a so-so regular season, and everybody picks them, that team flames out? Think of the year Michigan State was that team.
Just last year, Iowa won the conference tournament.
Was that team. Yep. Lost in the first round. Yep. Remember Michigan State was that team that one year and then lost to Middle Tennessee in the first round that everybody had them as a champion? Yep. Just Duke kind of reminds me of that. And I'm going the double upset in this sub-region. I'm going to take the Ragin' Cajuns over perennial NCAA tournament flop Rick Barnes in Tennessee as well. Down at the bottom of the bracket, I have Kentucky surviving against Providence. That's a good matchup there in that 6-11 game. Kansas State, which kind of peaked about 2 months ago, and is in my mind is overrated as a 3. I almost looked at Montana State in the upset here, but I went ahead and went with Kansas State. I'm going to have Michigan State beating USC in a future conference game, and then Marquette advancing over what has become now perennial automatic qualifier Vermont. In the round of 32, my head says here to pick Memphis. My heart says, though, do you really think Anthony Hardaway is going to beat Matt Painter in a one-and-done game? No. That's literally the analysis I came up with for this game. I know Memphis presses. I watched Purdue try to hand a Big Ten championship to Penn State in the final 5 minutes of that game last week when Penn State started to press them. We know how athletically limited Purdue is in the backcourt. I got to see Anthony Hardaway beat Matt Painter in a one-and-done game before I pick that. I'm going to go with Oral Roberts over Louisiana in the Cinderella sub-regional there. Kentucky gets by Kansas State to advance to the Sweet 16. And the first big upset in the round of 32, I'll have Michigan State in their 25th consecutive NCAA tournament under Tom Izzo, amazing streak, upsetting Marquette, which I kind of think is a little overrated, actually. I'll have Kentucky and Michigan State in the Sweet 16. Too much size for Kentucky up front, and I think they get by to the Elite Eight. I think Purdue beats Oral Roberts in the Sweet 16 to get to the Elite Eight. And then, Kentucky with Oscar has the size to go against Edey, and then I think they're too quick everywhere else. Kentucky goes to the Final Four 1 year after they had a tremendous meltdown against St. Peter's in round one, when they were considered kind of that team again, like Iowa and Kentucky, where two teams had great conference tournaments. Everybody was all over them. They both lost in the first round. I think the pressure's totally off Kentucky. They're also on that list, by the way, of top 6 teams under Bart Torvik in offensive efficiency since February 1. So I'll take Kentucky with the size up front, one All-American versus another. They cancel each other out in the pivot, and then too much athleticism everywhere else. Kentucky to the Final Four.
We do have some variance and disagreement in this region. I've got Purdue, obviously. I have Memphis coming out of their 8-9 matchup with Florida Atlantic, but I agree. If you're Purdue, you're really rooting for Florida Atlantic. I've got actually Duke over Oral Roberts. This was another one I wanted to take. Oral Roberts, though, the Summit League this year, just crummy. I mean, it is a low major league, but I just wonder how battle-tested they are and will be ready for. The Tennessee-Louisiana thing, I love that upset pick from you. I've got to go with chalk here, and I have to believe that talent wins out in a matchup like this. But I'm not going to fault any, unless you're picking every 16 seed. If you can make a credible upset for almost every other matchup in the first couple of rounds. I, too, have Kentucky getting by Providence, Kansas State over Montana State. Actually, having listened to you, I kind of wish I would have picked Montana State. I do have another, I think, a 14 seed upset elsewhere in the brackets. I actually am not sold on Michigan State at all. I've got USC pulling the mild upset over Michigan State in the first round and going on to the round of 32. I have Marquette as well, getting by Vermont. Vermont is not the same team they were a few years ago. They kind of like to play a little slower pace, or at least they don't have as much offensive threats as they did a couple of years ago. So I've got Marquette getting by Vermont with relative ease. In the round of 32, I actually picked Memphis to upset Purdue.
I don't think that's a bad pick at all.
So I just think... I think if you're Memphis, you just let Zach Edey get his, and then everywhere else on the court, your matchup, it probably favors you. So I've got Memphis getting by Purdue, pulling the 8-1 upset. I have Tennessee beating Duke.
Wow, would the state of Tennessee go nuts if that happened?
I've got Tennessee beating Duke because I agree with your analysis about Duke. I just think the matchup with Oral Roberts, they should be able to get by. But overall, I'm not totally sold on this team. I, too, have Kentucky getting by Kansas State, and then USC, a surprising run to the Sweet 16 out of the Pac-12. In the Sweet 16, I've got Tennessee over Memphis. So I think Tennessee is actually going to make a little bit of noise, and then I've got Kentucky over USC. And coming out of this region into the Final Four, I have Kentucky.
Tennessee is the team that really it causes the disruption and the difference of our brackets there.
Agreed. Here's the Midwest.
All right, in the Midwest region, as we move now right to left, I'll go with number 1 seeded Houston. I think they'll rest Marcus Sasser one more game against Northern Kentucky. They don't need him. I think when you look at this region, by the way, all the way through, you see a lot of teams that are very defensive-minded. You've heard me say all year long when Houston has come up, Aaron, that, yes, all the metrics say they're the number 1 team in the country, but they also need the game to look a certain way. Well, look at the way I have my bracket develop. I didn't do this on purpose. All these teams are teams that will play the way Houston wants to play it. And so I just don't think you're going to beat Houston at their own game. Auburn, I know with Bruce Pearl, you think of the press and the up-tempo. That's not them this year. They are a slower-paced, defensive-minded team this year. I think they beat Iowa, who amazingly has not gotten – I always talk about that Purdue stat, not making a Final Four since 1980 despite all their success. Iowa hasn't even gotten out of the first weekend in the 21st century. So I think former Iowa assistant Bruce Pearl continues that streak. Miami has a key injury in their backcourt. Drake has a phenomenal backcourt on its own and a legit big man. When I say legit big man, I don't mean some like 6'9" skinny Euro who shoots threes. Like an actual space eater. They can bang. They're a tough matchup. So I'm going to go Drake in the 12-5 upset here. I'm going to take Indiana over Kent State, but like Virginia and Furman, man, I thought long and hard.
And this is late at night. This game is late at night, too.
Yeah, I thought long and hard about taking Kent State.
Yeah.
In the end, Indiana's on that metric I like of teams that are good on two-pointers and two-point defense and don't need a lot of three-pointers made. So I'll go with them. But, man, I almost picked the flashes here. I'll have Iowa State against, I think it'll be Mississippi State that beats Pitt. First one to 50, by the way, wins that game between Iowa State and Mississippi State. I'll take Xavier over Kennesaw State. Texas A&M, I think, will be too quick athletically for Penn State. But that's a game that I could weirdly see. I could weirdly see Penn State win by 20 though. That's the night that they make 14 threes, that kind of night. And then I have Texas over Colgate in the 2-15 matchup. In the round of 32, Houston, again, playing a defensive-minded team. So they're better at it than just about everybody else. So I have Houston marching on to the Sweet 16. I think Drake, because they have the space eater, they can bang with Trace Jackson Davis. This is where Indiana, not really having a true point guard, gets exposed with the way Drake plays defense. And Drake is the second double-digit team I have marching on to the Sweet 16. I'll have Iowa State pulling a 6-3 upset in the round of 32 for the second year in a row. They did it to Wisconsin last year. They do it to Xavier this year. And then actually that was a 7-2 upset, if I remember, or 10-2 upset last year that they pulled. My bad. And then I have, we talked about in your bracket how the state of Tennessee would go nuts. How about this in the state of Texas? Texas A&M in the NCAA tournament. And I'll have Texas. They're one of the 5 teams who ranks in the top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency at Ken Palm. I have them marching on against the once and future, once again, conference rival Texas A&M. In the round of 16, Texas ends Iowa State's consecutive Cinderella runs to the Sweet 16, although this year they're more expected to get there. And then Drake, again, another team, plays a defensive style of basketball that fits right into Houston's hands. So I think Houston marches on to the Elite Eight. And then the state of Texas goes nuts for the second game in a row. Houston beats Texas, befuddles Marcus Carr, forces him into too many bad shots, and Houston makes the Final Four. In the end, I'll take Kelvin Sampson against the interim coach at Texas in a one-and-done scenario here. I have the Cougars making the Final Four.
So in this region, we have the exact same picks across the board except for the Elite Eight. I've got Houston, Auburn, Drake, Indiana, Iowa State, Xavier, Texas A&M, and Texas all winning their first round games. In the round of 32, Iowa and Auburn are both, they both fit into the one and done in their conference tournaments. They're two teams that are kind of going nowhere fast, but I think Auburn gets a little further. Houston, I've got them beating Auburn in the round of 32. Drake over Indiana. And don't forget, you say Drake is a defensive-minded. They also can put up a lot of points, too. I've seen them do that. Of course, that's in the Missouri Valley. But they do have the capability of putting up points when they need to. I've got them over Indiana. I, too, have Iowa State. I was kind of sold on Xavier. They can play defense. They have quite a bit of length. Former Iowa player, Jack Nunge inside. He had a pretty good season, got a pretty good career even for Xavier. But at the end, I just think Iowa State plays such a brand of in-your-face defense. I think you can get in the heads of those players. And then Texas, I've got them over Texas A&M as well. If you're wondering if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area and you're trying to get in to the NCAA tournament this weekend and you wondered why ticket prices shot up, it's because of that matchup right there on probably going down on Saturday. Mm-hmm. In the Sweet 16, I have Houston beating Drake, but man, I would love to see Iowa State and Drake both win in the Sweet 16 and meet up in the Elite Eight. That would be hilarious. The state of Iowa would light up them, even Iowa fans, I think. All the same picks.
Who do Iowa fans root for there? It's got to be Drake, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think
because they're the cute younger brother.
Mm-hmm.
They're the baby brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Iowa State's the true nemesis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking about the big banger inside that Drake has and the ability that they have to kind of size people up. My wife is a UNI alumnus, Northern Iowa alumnus. They play in the same conferences as Drake, of course. And they have not been good not been great, I should say, the last few years. And we're pointing at that guy, and I'm like, why can't you and I go out and get somebody like him? Anyway, so we've got the only disagreement we have in this region is I've got Texas actually going out to the Final Four over Houston, but I don't, the case you made, Houston can kind of play their own brand of ball the entire way through. I think that's pretty solid analysis. Here we are, final region.
So let us go to the West. Kansas against the historically black College of Howard. They march on there as the 1 seed. I've got Illinois, and I'm picking them strictly because everyone is picking Arkansas. So I'm just fading the public here. Everyone's picking Arkansas,
not bad.
So I'm going to go with Illinois. I've got St. Mary's and VCU, and one of the most fascinating contrasts of styles you'll ever see in an opening first-round game of the NCAA tournament. I mean, St. Mary's plays amongst the slowest pace in the country, has for years. VCU is one of the last teams left playing that 40 minutes of hell. Nolan Richardson havoc, from the Shaka Smart era at VCU. I'll have the more experienced St. Mary's marching on there, but I almost picked this 12-5 too. UConn, I have surviving Iona. Man, I know when Dan Hurley saw, Patino, really? You knew he was like, come on, man. Okay, but I do think they will survive. They're one of the 5 teams that comes into the tournament, top 25 in KenPom, both offense and defensive efficiency. We always seem to see one of the teams that wins in the first 4 pull an upset, and of course, I'm talking about the power conference teams. I'm going to take that here. I'm going to have Arizona State or Nevada, because I could see both. Arizona State's got a real point guard in Frankie Collins. Nevada, they're going to come in with a chip because everybody and their mom said they didn't belong in the field, right? So Steve Alford's going to play that up. And TCU has just been so mercurial all year long. I could see them going out in the first round. I could see them making the Final Four. I'm going to have Gonzaga over Grand Canyon in the next round. Northwestern over Boise State. Everybody likes Boise State here. This is a different Northwestern team. It's very guard-oriented. And so that should play well for at least one win in March. And then I'll have UCLA over UNC Asheville there in the 2-15 matchup. In the round of 32, Kansas, too much for Illinois. In the round of 32 there. I'll have UConn beating St. Mary's. Believe me, UConn, they're much more worried about Iona than who in the second round because of who the coach of Iona is. I promise you that. And the amount of time he's got to prep for that game. I'll take Gonzaga beating Arizona State in my bracket there. And then UCLA moves past Northwestern, another future conference game, which still sounds weird to say. In the Elite Eight, I've got UCLA and the defense. Too much defensively for Gonzaga. They march on to the Elite Eight. And then I've got Kansas beating UConn. That's a heck of a Sweet 16 right there, by the way. I've got Kansas beating UConn and marching on to the Elite Eight, where UCLA upsets the defending national champion and number 1 seeded Jayhawks and goes to its second Final Four in 3 years under Mick Cronin.
Have a little more variance in this region as well. I have Kansas. I've got Arkansas. I trust them a little bit more than Illinois, but I like the fading the public play. I have my other 12-5 upset because of the contrast of styles. I've got VCU upsetting St. Mary's. I have UConn. I wanted to pick the 13-4 upset, kind of like you, but I've got UConn moving on. They've had a pretty good year. I still have TCU over the eventual winner of Arizona State and Nevada. My big upset probably of the entire tournament, I have Grand Canyon over Gonzaga in the first round as a 14-3 upset. Grand Canyon, if they get on fire from beyond the arc, which I saw them do a couple of times in their conference tournament, and Gonzaga, if they are just not hitting on all cylinders, which it seems like it's required for them to do to even win games out west, I think this could have the makings of an upset. I, too, have Northwestern over Boise State. I've watched Boise State a couple of times. Pretty inconsistent team. Northwestern, much more consistent, so I kind of trust them a little bit more. UCLA over UNC Asheville as well, getting out of the first round. Round of 32, Kansas over Arkansas. I just think there's too much there for Arkansas to deal with. UConn over VCU. I think UConn, this is going to be kind of somewhat of a renaissance for them, getting back into the Sweet 16. I have Grand Canyon over TCU as well. A very big surprise for Grand Canyon, making it to the Sweet 16, and UCLA over Northwestern. In the Sweet 16, I've got Kansas over UConn and UCLA over Grand Canyon. I have Kansas over UCLA coming out of the Western region into the Final Four. I can totally see UCLA, but once we get to if I were betting on that game, I don't know what the line would be, but UCLA would be hard to stay away from, which makes me think do the opposite. Do the opposite of my gut instinct. So that's kind of my analysis here. Whatever is the opposite when you get into the Sweet 16 and Elite 8, do the opposite of your gut instinct. That brings us to our Final Four.
I'll start with mine. In one semifinal, I have Kentucky and Arizona, a battle of Wildcats there. I think Arizona has the size to more than match up with Kentucky. And I just think in the end, they're a more disciplined team overall. So here we have a matchup of two of those top 6 teams in the Torvik offensive efficiency since February 1. I think the Arizona style of Wildcat marches on. On the other side of the bracket, in that Final Four, here we have maybe the two best defensive teams in the United States, according to all the metrics. I'm going to take UCLA, though, with I think Tiger Campbell is the difference, makes enough plays. UCLA marches on, and I think we have an all Pac-12 national championship game. UCLA beating Arizona. And yes, I know Clark is hurt for UCLA. Yes, I know he was the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. It's a Mick Cronin team, so they're not going to play defense now. They're going to play defense. Did you see they barely allowed 60 points a game in their 3 games in the Pac-12 tournament? Only lost to Arizona on a last-second shot. I think they're going to be okay. Not to mention, who else are we picking? It's not like, go with Alabama, your number 1 overall seed. It's not like they have a long legacy of success in the NCAA tournament, and they're also a very 3-point dependent team. So there really isn't that team this year. I probably would have picked whoever I picked to win the UCLA-Kansas game to win the national championship. I'm picking UCLA, so I'm going to go with the Bruins, and Mick Cronin wins his first national championship. And UCLA, I think this would be its first national title. I know they got to several Final Fours under Ben What's-His-Nuts when he was the coach there. But I think they kept losing to Florida in the Final Four when you had those great teams there. So I think this might be their first national championship since 95 in this century.
Wow.
So I'll take the Bruins to win it all in a very mercurial NCAA tournament.
So on one side of the bracket, I too have Arizona versus Kentucky, and I have Arizona for basically the same analysis that you gave.
Well, you've got 2 conference games in each semifinal. I like it.
Yes. Well, Arizona-Kentucky isn't a conference game.
Okay,
yeah. So
my bad.
Arizona versus Kentucky, I've got that coming out of one side of the bracket, and I've got Arizona entering the national championship game. On the other side, I have a rematch of the Big 12 tournament title game in Kansas versus Texas, except this time Kansas will vanquish Texas and repeat appearances in the NCAA tournament championship game. I have Arizona, though. I have Arizona over Kansas by a score of 74-70 in the national title game. And Arizona will be your national champions.
So I kind of faded the Big 12 a little bit because it reminds me of the Big 10 a couple of years ago when it had like an all-time year.
I hear you.
And we didn't get any teams in the Final Four. I think Michigan got to the Elite 8 and lost to UCLA. So that's why I'm going to fade the Big 12 a little bit, but can't argue because, again, this thing is so wide open. I could see a path for 20 different teams to make it to the Final Four for sure. Yep. So, all right, we'll come back and wrap things up here in a moment. This week's Twitter poll results. We asked you, is this finally the year? One of the craziest stats in all of collegiate sports. Purdue, despite more Big Ten championships, including this year, than anybody else, has not made a Final Four since Joe Barely Cares in 1980. That's before Gene Cady started coaching at Purdue. Do they finally get it done this year? 75% of you said nope, which means 25% of you said yes. Feedback of the week in response to me saying Rutgers, Wisconsin, and Michigan seasons should be over. And as far as we're concerned at Bigger Ten, they are. because the NIT as an event shouldn't even exist. Ben Gillespie says, wow, what an absolute insane thing to think. That's insane. You may disagree, but it's insane to think that there shouldn't be another also-ran tournament for teams that weren't good enough to make the actual tournament that counts. That's insane. So,
I with the NIT, you know, when Iowa has been in it, I'm like, okay, cool, a little extra basketball programming. I don't really have any strong feelings about it. But to say it's insane to so you have strong feelings about it, obviously.
Yes.
Saying it's
yeah.
you know, I don't fault you for that. To say that that's insane, though, it's like, think of a knockoff product. Let's say you could have had a Maserati, but instead you got a, I don't know, you got a Daihatsu.
A Ford Taurus.
Ford Taurus, thank you. Could have had a Maserati, you got a Ford Taurus. Okay? And you tell somebody you could have had this Maserati or nothing at all, or you could have had a Maserati. And the person is like, no, you're insane. You're insane. The strong feeling of I want my knockoff product, I'm never going to quite understand that. I want my knockoff, damn it. I want my lower quality thing, dang it. I don't understand that. It seems like there are a lot of people. I mean, you encountered some Michigan fans. Any analysis, by the way, on Michigan's game tonight, Steve? You encountered some Michigan fans. Well, we need it for this, this, and this. But to say it's insane, that's just
insane.
Very odd. Very odd. That's the nicest thing I can say about it.
It's kind of insane. All right, that'll do it. Thank you for watching here on Bigger 10 this week. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, 5-star review, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on iTunes, etc. Please help us with the algorithmic gods. Make the offering. Make it! Thank you. Thanks to all of you who have already genuflected to the great, powerful algorithm in the sky. Thank you for that. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. We'll have tons of instant reaction going on to the Big Ten games in the NCAA tournament this weekend. And you can do that at Bigger10, at Bigger10 on Twitter. Until the next episode, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you then.